So welcome. If anybody wants to share wins in the chat later, we are always happy to celebrate wins. So in the sake of respecting the time of the folks who have managed to make it here, and just sort of talk a little bit about what our structure is today, which is really that Tracy and I are here and we are prepared to answer questions. And we did not get anyone submitting questions in advance for this session. So really, it's all you and your questions, and we'll talk about whatever is of interest to those of you that are here. We are recording this so that we can share with people on YouTube. And so if that has an impact on how you want your name showing, or whether you want to be on camera, or whether you want to put something in the chat and have us read it into the group, that is something we just want to make sure everybody is aware of, that that our answers and your questions will get shared. So if you want them to be anonymized by putting them in the chat, you can message them either to the whole group or to me or Tracy individually, and we will do that.
People are trickling in.
Yep.
So basically, when Kate said structure, she really meant like there isn't much and it's all up to you. So I hope y'all didn't all come hoping to listen to other people's questions, because I do that a lot. I appreciate the honesty, Sheree. Well done. Thank you for your honesty.
Yeah, and you know, hopefully some of you that if that's where you came in from might generate your own questions as the conversation goes on.
So who's got something to start us off?
What's on your mind in the neurodiversity and coaching space these days that we can talk about, that you'd like to hear our take on?
Everybody came to listen to everybody else's questions.
Lisa put her hand up. All right, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. I would love to know some good questions or strategies to coach around rejection-sensitive dysphoria, because it's coming up a lot for my clients at the minute.
Can you flesh out just a little bit sort of what patterns you're seeing in your clients specifically, how it's showing up for them?
So they're bringing it as the topic for the whole coaching, of saying struggling with rejection-sensitive dysphoria and wanting to go away with strategies around it. But I'm conscious that there doesn't feel that much we can always do about rejection sensitivity when it's like an automatic physical response to things. But it's coming up in the workplace and in the home environment. So this is different clients bringing it of just saying almost like RSD, discuss. And I'm like, no, we're not here to discuss. I'm here to coach you on it. but would be good to have some kind of tips of questions that can evoke some awareness on how to support that better.
Yeah. So Tracy, I've got lots of thoughts, but I'm curious whether you have thoughts before I sort of dive in.
I have another question first. Sort of like, so what Kate asked what patterns you see. What are the pattern of responses that you're seeing that people want to change? Does that make sense?
They want to change having that reaction. So almost kind of asking for how they can not experience it, which I don't think is a thing. So it's more strategies of how you can deal with it better when it does happen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's really good stuff in here. And there are a couple of different directions that things can go, of course. The first is I don't want to have that response is a place that you can do some coaching around. You can actually do some coaching around what is it like to have that response? What is it like to feel betrayed by yourself in this way? There's actually some coaching you can do around that, because the I don't want to be who I am is actually quite a block for getting progress made in this area. Because there are two things. One is, how do I cope with having this reaction? And then the other is, what can I do to decrease the reaction? And what can I do to cope with this reaction is mostly compassion, getting used to feeling the feelings. And then in that space of having the feelings, doing the cognitive reframing. The challenge happens if we get too far from the feelings part, which is the hard part. If we get too far from the feelings, nothing that we do changes what happens later in terms of having the reaction. And so the thing that I would go towards is what is that experience? So Tracy's question was heading there, like, what is that experience that you have in that moment? Can you make friends with that feeling a little bit? And then get curious about, what are the assumptions the part of you that's reacting that way might be making about what other people think, what it says about you, what assumptions are underneath there. Tracy, I feel like there's probably more specificity you can add to this in terms of like specific questions.
So multiple things. And the first thing, which I'm sure you're probably already doing, is just sort of normalizing and validating, like that this is a thing. I just mentioned to somebody last Friday as they were asking me about this, like science has shown that the same receptors get activated for RSD as do for physical pain. So like, this is a real thing and it's okay, and it's your brain. So that part that Kate was saying around like, you can't be somebody who you're not, right? So there's that part. One of the really helpful things is just knowing it's coming, right? So like, sometimes my clients are surprised every time that they get this hit, you know? And so sort of asking questions that help them integrate it as part of what might happen. And so have sort of like a framework or a mindset going into situations that might, for instance, you're going into a performance review, right? Rather than just like heading in and seeing what happens. Like, okay, so if my emotions get overwhelming, what are my strategies? What am I going to do in that moment? What can I do? Right? I could breathe. I could ask for a few minutes. Those sorts of things. And then also like, what am I going to do afterwards? Right? So you don't set up a meeting for right after your performance review, because anticipate the fact that you may have some emotion stuff that you're going to have to deal with. So I think the part Kate was saying about like, normalize that this is going to happen. So that part about, like you said, not happening, that isn't a thing. The question is, when it does happen, what do I do? And the biggest thing that my clients have found helpful, which is so basic, but it's just to like slow down and take a step back and breathe, just chill. I realize that's really hard to do because the emotions want us to react in the moment, right? So like suddenly we act and we don't know what we did. So the other part of it is reflecting on it when it has happened. What happened? How did I feel about it? What did I do? What could I have done differently? And kind of getting that pattern so that they can start doing it in the moment more often. You're asking for specific questions. You know, I don't have specific questions for you. It depends.
The thing you're pointing at, Tracy, though, is Lisa, were you in the masterclass where we did the overwhelmed self exercise with the overwhelm piece? We talked about don't take people into it, but get people to like describe what the experience is. That actually getting them to describe from the outside what that experience is learning that they can describe it without feeling it is important for the coaching piece. Because talking about it, you're absolutely right. Talking about it is not actually useful. Describing what happens when they have that experience helps them separate the part of themselves that's having that experience from the part of themselves that can see that experience as something that is part of a greater whole. And that makes it easier for the part of them that wants to have control, that wants to sort of have some spaciousness around this and not be driven by this reaction, can help that be in charge. I often get my clients to draw a symbol, like that self, when you're with that rejection sensitive self, that part of you, when it shows up, like draw that and then talk to me about what you've just drawn to help build that separation. Because the hard part is staying aware of it in that moment where it's, I feel all the things and I don't want to be here. I want to get out of here.
So when you say
Does
ask
feel
them to
helpful?
describe it, do you mean as in to be able to recognize, to say, I'm recognizing that I'm feeling RSD at the minute? I'm not quite following what you mean by.
Yeah. So to say, so the coaching question might be, so when you've experienced this RSD reaction in the past, tell me what it is that you've experienced. So not what was that like you don't actually want them, like, because what was that like might encourage them to actually sort of go in and somaticize and like imagine it. And you don't want that. What you want is, tell me what that was like. If I had been watching you from the outside, what would I have seen? If I had been, if you would tell me about it. Oh, my heart was racing. I felt small. I felt like I was 2 years old. I heard my mother's voice in my head saying, you should be better than this. Like whatever those things are, to be able to talk about it creates distance. And then say, okay, what does the part of you that's here now want to say to that person? So like that part of you, to remember that like it's not the end of the world when this shows up in, say, the performance review example. Does that help?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tracy, for you adding something.
Corollary for that to me is, and this is, I have to be careful on the line of like taking them into it versus not, but like asking them, what did you feel in your body in that time? Or like, what was the experience of your body? And then being able to use those things identified, like Kate said, or like that question as, oh wait, when this happens, I'm probably in an RSD moment. So step back. Like having that be the helpful trigger to like cut off the reaction piece. So how's all that landing and what's missing?
Yeah, I think that's
Second
helpful.
question.
Thank you. So I think I'm hearing that it's okay to do some of that education piece, which is kind of where I have been going almost, with people recognizing that just hearing that it's a thing helps them quite a lot, of being like, oh, it's a thing. It's like, yeah, it definitely is a thing. It's a big thing for all those of us with ADHD. But yeah, so those questions around just getting them to recognize it, to name it, to be able to then distance themselves slightly, I guess, by almost just saying, okay, I'm acknowledging that RSD is being present here. Take a step back and think.
Yeah, there are actually ways to reduce that reactivity later, but none of them work until you've got that separation. And so the place to start is that separation.
And Ravon made a good point of don't follow them into it, right? There's always the thing of you need to stay regulated to help them co-regulate so they don't fall into that experience. So thank you for adding that. What do the rest of you think about this question? I mean, like we've been nattering on. What's your experience or what do you have to add?
Which part, the education part or just the RSD portion of it?
I was not being specific, so yes. If that's not a coach answer, I don't know what is, right? But yes, anything you'd like to answer.
Well, I had some thoughts around it, only because I was coaching someone the other day about the same topic. And we were talking about how long that emotion really lasts, because emotions are chemicals. And so he, this particular client likes pragmatism in terms of how he likes to be coached. So we, the pragmatic part of it is, well, it's chemicals and it's 90 seconds unless you keep talking about it or thinking about it. And it was rejection from from family about something he had cooked. And so we figured out, if he just twirls his like wedding ring around as a token, because that's what he has on him and available to him. So I can't get up and run out of the room because, that's not socially acceptable. I can't, I don't want people to, see me imploding while I'm sitting there. So what can I do? And he's basically said, well, I don't even give myself the 90 seconds, before, I'm off in my head, going down this path. So he agreed, that he would breathe and, use his wedding ring under the table as the thing, like a fidget, because he, forgets his glasses and forgets everything else that he has. But he would use this wedding ring as his token, to kind of regulate himself in that moment. And, as a neurodivergent myself, I'm literally listening, to you all talk about it and thinking about the moments that I'm in it as well, and how challenging it is, to detach yourself from the emotion. But then I started thinking about the education component of it. And, just to kind of piggyback on what Lisa was saying, I'm meeting a lot of clients that like literally know nothing about the condition. Like they don't know anything about it. I had a client say to me, so is procrastination, part of it? I said, oh yeah, like that's a major part of it. And so I'm trying to balance like how much time with, with clients that I spend on the education piece and like what I can do with them, like in between, like with the accountability checks to kind of follow up with them to like, give them more information. But, like whether like with this particular client, would he even be inclined to read more information about the condition? Would he be, or maybe he'd be inclined to listen to something more about the condition? But, just the balance of, how much education you provide in a session, and then, really getting them, I guess, to be proactive about spotting it the next time that it comes up.
So the education piece is like, it's a recurring thing in our space, right? Around neurodiversity coaches, like how much do we educate versus like, is that really coaching is always the question. And I think there's arguments that just coach, like you don't need that part, just coach. And there's arguments that psychoeducation should be a good chunk of coaching in this space. And so I'm interested to see where y'all, especially Kate, comes down on that. I droplets, one sentence or two sentences, and that's it. And then see what their, ask them what their response is. And if they want to go into it, they want to ask me questions, I might answer a couple more questions, but I'm very soon going to turn it back to them in terms of like, okay, but what's your experience of this? What's happening for you? So I do that thing about like, I had a client who he was describing it and I said, have you heard of rejection sensitivity dysphoria? And he was like, what's that? And so I was explaining just a smidge, like, this is really typical for ADHDers, and here's what it is, and here's what it feels like. What's that doing for you? And then we went into what his experience was. But it's more I use it to normalize what's going on for them, so their anxiety can come down a little bit. So then we can coach in it a little bit more.
Yeah,
but everybody's got like a flow around that, and it also depends on the client. Kate, what do you think?
Yeah, but that thing about I do it to normalize. So I drip in with some of my clients, I drip in a lot of teaching. And with some of my clients, I drip in almost none. And a lot of it has to do with how much compassion they have and how much patience they have and how much they understand what is required to do the kind of work that we're doing. And so one of the things that I do in something like this where emotions are charged, like RSD is a great example for this. In places where the emotions get charged and the emotions plus the getting in motion doesn't get interrupted easily. I talk quite a lot about, so if the client with the wedding ring example, I might actually talk about, so after this session, you're going to go out there and you're going to try this. And sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it isn't going to work, because bringing this stuff to consciousness is really hard. What are you like, how do you want to respond to yourself when you notice you didn't do it? So we'll do coaching around that. And I'm sort of normalizing that this is actually hard and it takes time and it takes practice. I might talk about how are you going to celebrate when you notice in the moment that, oh, look, I noticed and I have an opportunity for choice. How are you going to celebrate that? And the other thing that I like to do is I like to, when I'm talking about in order for this to work, the part of you that's paying attention needs to actually be in control, not the part of you that is getting sucked up by the drive. Sometimes I'll say, so if you have difficulty with this and we have to spend a bunch of sessions on it, I'm totally okay with that, because I know that every time we talk about it, we're helping reinforce the part of you that talks about it rather than being driven by it. And I know from my experience that it's more likely that that part of you will show up when you need it under stress if we've talked about it a whole bunch of times. And so do you notice how I did a whole bunch of education in that? And it's a really important part of the process, because particularly with our really smart, really driven, and like speedy processing ADHDer clients, the fact that this is hard and takes months is really frustrating. And so to actually talk about, this is what coaching is for, is to make it like, we come here, we talk about the same thing all the time, and eventually you realize you can do it in real life. Is something that I bring in there in that sort of teaching piece as well.
Shane, I apologize because you said stuff and it got my brain going on to the next thing, and I neglected to acknowledge like what you did with that client. That makes so much sense. Like, what a great idea to use the thing that he's already got there. The thing it brought to mind for me in that was like, I have mixed feelings about, oh, what's his name? The positive intelligence guy, his program, which some of you might be familiar with. Shirzad Charmaine, is that it, Lisa? Yeah. And one of the things I took from it, though, he has these little moments of mindfulness, is that when something like that happens and you need to come back to center or you need to refocus, like this is one of the options, is just rubbing your fingers together like this and feeling your fingerprints, like, you know, the sort of like the texture of your fingerprints together. And you always have your fingers, right? So like, just, you can do that under the table and focus on that for 30 seconds, a minute, 90 seconds, until you can, you know, regulate a little bit. So the wedding ring, that'll work too. Like, yeah, nicely done. So I just wanted to come back to that. I'm sorry, because I was like, oh, the next, like, well, that makes me think of this thing. Welcome,
Yeah.
right, to the neurodivergent space. Yeah.
So thank you very much for that, Lisa, that question, Lisa. We could probably talk on this for a very much, like, we could probably do the whole time on this. And I'd be happy to, but I'm curious whether other people have other questions. Summer?
Yeah, Summer, please.
Hi, my question is around client that is finding herself in a profession that really does not suit who she is, and does not understand her. She is an engineer, a very, very neurodiverse engineer, diagnosed with ADHD. I suspect potentially there might be some autism there, because there is very much difficulty in communicating and reading other people, and has circuited through a lot of different companies, because she's not able to, one, focus on, even though she was brilliant in school and her neurodiversity really worked for her, now she's in this place of, you know, it's not about learning, it's about getting the work done. And it's become getting to the point of becoming like an abusive situation where every time she opens her mouth, she is criticized for what she says and how she says it. So I guess I'm kind of wondering, I need to start bringing up like, is this even, if you've circled through 8 different companies and you're coming into the same butting up against the culture, maybe you need to find a different culture to be in. So anyway, questions around that butting against work culture.
Do you want to take a beginning at this, Trace?
I understand the situation. What is the question? Kate, if you've got more of a handle on it, go for it.
Well, it's so complicated. It's hard to.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there
I don't mean to
are-
make you boil it down reductionistically.
I mean, what we've worked on so far is really just even calming her nervous system, because her nervous system is she's, I mean, the first 3 sessions, she couldn't stop crying. So before I get into even any kind of discussion of leaving work right now, I think, we're trying to work on what she can do, which is learning to breathe when these things come up. Yeah, so again, this is just, it's such a complex situation of, I need to get better at this so that I can, be accepted in my job. I need to be able to put into place things that are gonna allow me to get my work done. I need to be able to put things into place that are gonna allow me to be accepted and not talked down to every time I say something. But can this person even do that when can they make improvements while they're in such a terrible situation?
it's a super complicated question, and there are a whole bunch of different bits and pieces. The biggest piece from a coaching question is, can you be regulated with your client while they are in this chaos? Because it can be really hard. It can be really, really hard. The pulling the pieces apart for what is possible in this situation and what is possible in other situations is delicate work and requires usually asking the question, what is possible in this situation? What are you willing to try? In terms of the action steps out there, there's almost certainly, as you have noticed, a lot of need for holding space and validating how hard it is and how many emotions there aren't space to process. So at the end of every day, a situation like this is incredibly draining. So coaching around, what are you doing between leaving work and starting work the next day? And is that helping you be more or less resourced when you get to work the next day is really important, as sort of to look at the whole life, not just the work day. The question about, can you get better while you're in a place that is so harmful, it's hard. And depending on how triggered and how activated and how constant it is, the answer may be no. because it takes a lot of courage to come into another hard day and try something different. It might be yes. So you would need to do some coaching around what is the willingness, what is the capacity, what happens when things don't go well, how does compassion show up in those spaces during the day? The thing that I would caution against you taking too big a stance for is the whole field doesn't work for you. Because firstly, engineering is incredibly full of neurodivergent people. There are so many engineering is a creative field, and creatives have so much neurodivergence. So actually, the chances are that she's among peers and she's among like-minded people. It doesn't necessarily mean that it shows up at work, because it can be because masking is, real. So finding other people in her field outside of where she's at work to talk about things might be really, really powerful for her. Community and affinity group, but people who are not in her office. Like ERGs are not the solution to this problem.
ERGs.
Employee resource groups. Internal to the company, groups are not the solution to this problem. External community with other people in your field is the solution to how do we navigate this in some ways. There's a real temptation to take advantage of sort of employer well-being things, but often in this kind of case, those are the last place you want to go. Tracy, you've got big thoughts on your face, so I'm curious where you would take this.
Well, it took me a minute to sort of process, like put it all together, but it reminds me of a client I had recently, Kate, you'll recognize this, who was similar, like not the same circumstances, but was in a state of such overwhelm and crisis and stuckness, to put it mildly, that I actually got really frustrated trying to coach her, because, and it was like rehashing the stuff over and over, not being able to get a word in edgewise because she's just splatting, and then hearing her sort of rehearsing the same things over and over. So I'm like, okay, now we're in this loop. It's just getting entrenched more. And I even had the thought, which I don't remember the last time I had this thought, but I had this thought at one point where I thought to myself, she's uncoachable. At which point I went, you just had that thought. What's going on here? Like, what's going on with your range? What's going on with you? And so what some of the things that I tried to do were just like doing a lot of listening, popping in when I can, and just like moving the needle this much, the babyest of baby steps, and just allowing more for that trust and safety. There was nowhere else she had to talk about this. And so unfortunately, me too. Unfortunately, she had, her sessions were cut off. The firm that was paying for them let her go in the middle of her coaching. And one of the things they said was, well, we got you coaching and it wasn't working. And I was like, it was 4 sessions, 5 sessions. Like, come on, people. But those last couple sessions, she got more available to possibility. It was like, if I just was there with her and with her and with her and kept asking about little questions, little things here and there was more space as we went on. So some of it's that it just takes a while, for them to feel like, oh, this is a safe place for me to let it out. And also now, because I have that, like, I have a little more space for possibility.
Yeah, I have a client
Yeah.
who's in a very, very similar sort of situation. And we do a lot of, okay, why are you, like, what is important to you about not running away from this job? Like, what is it that is worth staying for? So we do a lot of like that, getting the bigger picture. This is like the market is tough and I've got a family. And so bringing the money home matters, kind of like, or why is it that, like, what makes it worth it? What makes it worth keeping up and trying? And then where are the places that it makes sense to bite my tongue and let them do the thing that I think is not the right thing because it's not worth my while to speak up in this meeting? Or where is the place that like I want to actually step back because I don't want to invite the responses and I'm willing to let the performance aspect pieces that that conversation might have go. Like, so those specific details about what's worth it and what's not worth it, meeting by meeting, we talk about quite a lot. We talk quite a bit about what recovery looks like after a difficult meeting. We talk a lot about who might be allies, who are the people that there is positive relationship with, what are their values, and are there ways that they can live their values in smaller ways, so that they feel like it's not all abusive, that it's not all trouble, that there's actually like, even in this difficult situation, I can, be kind to this poor person or reach out to this junior person, every now and then, just the little tiny things. And then permission to be like, don't stick, like, to like, if they decide that they don't want to stick their neck out, be like, cool. If that's what, like, if that's what helps you get through the day, you get to choose that. And like, you get to decide, I'm going to go for this performance related thing, and I'm not going to go for that performance related thing. To find the choice and the why they're making those choices can be really, really powerful. And then just like the RSD piece, like what happens when you're activated in the set piece? Can you separate yourself from that? Can you observe that? Can you describe what happens when you're in that really troubled space and see yourself a little bit from a distance and see what would be helpful from there? Many of those same tools are helpful in that situation. Is that giving you anything you can work with, Summer?
A
One,
lot.
one
Thank
other
you.
little thing that isn't a little thing. When it's so hard for them to do anything different, it's so hard for them to do any of this, the celebrations are even more important.
Mhm.
Like really recognizing them for things that would blow off, that ever, like that's not a big deal, or I should be able to do that. Like really celebrating when there is any movement, I think is key.
Yeah, the phrase, your cognitive mind might be telling you that's not a hard thing. And I know that for you in that situation, that is a really hard thing. Like, to make that distinction between the voice in their head that's saying that's not hard, I should be able to do this, and like the knowing that in fact for that person in that situation, that is a very hard thing.
Which also helps them start to internalize, like, things that are hard for me are hard for me, and like I can be celebratory when that happens. So what's come up for you as we've been chattering along?
Well, a lot. I would say that the things that are new thoughts and ideas for me are the finding community piece. That would be amazing. I'd love to find, if you know any resources for that, that would be great. And then
So
Just-
the short, that like the place that, what kind of engineering do they do?
mechanical for buildings.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I don't have resources off the top of my head, but for mechanical engineers, but I bet I can come up with some, because
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be mechanical, right? It can just, but being in that, just, they're such analytical thinkers, which is,
yeah,
yeah.
the thing about engineers is some of them recognize that what they're doing is a creative practice.
Mhm.
And those are the ones that your client needs to find. The ones who have a kind of they probably won't admit it to their peers until they've actually sort of let the trust and safety build, but who are actually like, this is my calling, like who use vocational, like avocational language, not vocational language. This is my calling. This is what I have to do. This is like what I'm here on the planet for, the kind of quasi-spiritual language. A lot of engineers actually feel that way. They just don't feel safe talking that way.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear what else you had, Summer. I just put in, we have a women in tech organization in Austin. So if maybe something like that in terms of like the way they think.
Okay.
Yeah,
That could be
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, in the software world, there are an awful lot of people who think of themselves as agilists who think this way and who see this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
I think, I don't think it has to be specific to her, but just being around others in general, I think is going to really help her. And I guess just getting into those specific instances that are really getting to her of like what does recovery look like after difficult meetings or after being criticized for how she shows up in a meeting. But yeah, I think the biggest thing I am taking away is really not being alone and having others to talk to.
Yeah, I think from a coaching perspective, it's really important for us to hold for ourselves so that we're totally comfortable with that these are not actually situations that that our clients are going to have big progress fast. And so that for us to remember and normalize that we can do really powerful coaching that doesn't show big results quickly, because repetition of a lot of small changes is how change happens. And one of the things that happens in this, is this a career mismatch or is the places is, I have a former client who came back to me for coaching at one point after I'd coached them in one setting and was like, so now I'm in the third company in a row with the same problem, and I'm starting to think that it's the industry and that maybe I need to figure out how to stay in this industry, in this role, rather than look for a new job. And I was like, I am so here for that coaching. But it's in the nuances. It's typically in the places where what it takes to succeed in the workplace and what it takes to either do the previous role or to be in school, which for many people is the previous role, right? Isn't the same. And so there's actually a skill up level that needs to happen that is not always explicitly taught and should be explicitly taught, but you get left behind if it's not explicitly taught.
Who else has something to add to this conversation? It's been Kate and me. We always have things to say and opinions to share.
Yeah, I had a client. I have a client in a similar situation. He's a full stack engineer, and was with one company, and I mean it was abuse, clearly, but he really likes the money, and I guess he has this. I liken it to this thing where, society tells us, we need to be engineers and we have to be these certain professions. And he's kind of in that mindset. But at the same time, he basically has told me, well, it's not meaningful to me. It's not purposeful to me. So we're on this journey together to figure out what that is. But the first thing that he did was we came up with this list. We co-created this list of criteria about what he needs in his next workplace, whether it's engineering or not. And he came up with this list, and he actually kind of incorporated it into his personal life with his friendships. And that's kind of made the difference for him. So he was like, okay, I'm going to, he basically used all his leave at this job because he's like, I'm not going back there. I've had it with them. And he applied to these other jobs, but he carried his list of criteria with him to this next job, to basically express that these are the things that he needs in this next position. And it was so nice, so he's like two or 3 weeks into the job now. And when we got on last Friday, he said, I asked for some help the other day, and my coworker, took the time to like help me, learn blah, 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 blah skill or whatever it was that he didn't know how to do. And he was it was a different conversation because he was so miserable. But so he's gotten a signing bonus and he's making more money and he's happier. But even though he still doesn't feel like it's purposeful, he's in a better environment, and we're exploring like what his next thing is going to be in terms of doing something purposeful. But until he gets into something more purposeful, at least he can be happier, and not in a space where, he's going to work and feeling miserable every day, because he was literally miserable every day. I mean, he took the last month off of work, and went to Hawaii and did a whole bunch of different things, because he could not be in that office anymore. And so I was happy that, it got to a point, but he's hung in there for a long time, Summer. I was like, why do you, in my mouth, like, why does he keep going back to this office? He really wants to go back to this office and be in this environment. But until we got to a point where he was fed up with it and realized that, okay, I need to feel differently every day, that's when he decided we would come up with this list of things that he needs in this next space.
Yeah. What's going through my mind as I'm listening to you, like, is firstly, like, this is a great move for your client in terms of opening up ease for then being able to have a slightly different conversation about possibility. And so, and quite often we'll find that like the next step isn't the final step, that it's actually like we have to take a bunch of steps to get, and our clients have to take a bunch of steps to get closer to where they want. But the other thing that I'm thinking about is actually how much all of these things can cycle together, and how much when we're coaching, taking a whole life perspective is really, really powerful. Because you mentioned the like not purposeful at work, bringing it into the friendships. And then that can sometimes loosen up enough space to actually make it easier to feel like you can move around your career. So to actually be willing as a coach to sort of pursue how the balance works is really, really powerful sometimes. The other thing that happens is one of the reasons that people stay in jobs is I don't want to be rejected when I'm looking for new jobs. So like we could be back at the RST conversation right now. Right? That's one of the reasons that people don't leave, is because it's easier to stay, or it feels in the moment easier to stay than to face the rejection of a job search. And so all of these pieces about what are the little things that we do, how do we recover, how do we create ease, they snowball if we can get positive momentum with our clients. And just like they become this vicious circle if our clients get trapped in them. Yeah, it's tough stuff. Brave work we do walking into these spaces with our clients. I mean, that's the other thing, is like to walk into these spaces and be like, it's okay, we're going to hang out here with you in this hard place.
I've started telling my clients, I had a client the other day who, like, I asked in the course of our conversation, I had asked 3 questions, and each of those 3 questions, she'd been like, that's hard. And I finally said, yeah, coaching's where you do the hard stuff. It is not for the faint of heart, like for the clients, right? It's not easy. What else? Either around this or next question thing? Thank you, Summer, for bringing that forward.
Yeah, what a great, great.
It's complex.
And like, what a great and also like terribly common situation.
Right?
Yeah.
Makes my heart hurt.
I was
have a
just,
qu- oh,
I was
go
just
ahead.
going to say really quick, that the phrase that comes to mind that when Shane was talking is having agency in the midst of turmoil, and having that list provided agency, and then you get to decide what you're doing because you have agency even when you don't have control over a lot of things. So I just really liked that.
Yeah. Finding the places of agency is so powerful, and it can take a while to find the places of agency if our clients are feeling particularly trapped, and if they are if their circumstances are narrowly confining, it can take a while to find those places of agency.
But again, it's finding the little places first, right? Like, nope, no examples, but finding those little places first. And like Kate was saying, letting that snowball. The one that comes to mind is when I worked at a law firm, it was a terribly misogynistic law firm. And we had a lunchroom, and you could go sit in the lunchroom and eat your lunch, except like the partners would come in and ask people about their dating lives and like make jokes. Like it was a lawsuit waiting to happen. No joke, and like the agency I had was I stopped eating my lunch in there. I started going out for lunch. Cost a little bit more money, but like that was what I could do to remove myself from the situation. Like this little bit of a thing. But wow, it was better. They were gross. Asia, you were saying something about the same time Erin was. What you got?
Yeah, so this is just kind of like a practical question, but something that you mentioned in this last segment reminded me of something I've been thinking about. So just in terms of like, there are certain clients that I have now that I'm thinking of that it would be potentially like maybe they could get their job to sponsor their coaching, or to partially, if they have a professional development stipend, maybe they can get that applied to coaching. And I have had clients do that in the past without me having to mention it. But I'm wondering how you've gone about kind of helping people get coaching sponsored, by their workplace successfully.
Yeah. It's
I mean,
a great question. When I've had that situation, it's mostly been they come with like knowing that they can do that from their employers. Like that's how they come to me. And it's a really good question. Kate, so like I haven't figured out how to do that yet, I guess is the answer for me. That's helpful. Kate?
I mean, mostly so I was an internal coach for a little while, and so I was trying to be an advocate internally for more people getting coaching. And that was a sort of long-standing conversation with the rest of the L&D folks about the value of the investment in coaching. And that actually took running a little bit of a pilot program and demonstrating it and showing that it was valuable. So on one side, I've done that a little bit. Most of the people who come to me whose work pays for it, it hasn't been a very difficult ask. The few times that I've helped people really sort of make that ask, the coaching's had two components. The first is what makes it hard for you to ask. So on their own sort of courage piece and speaking up and taking voice for themselves piece. And then the other is, what do you think that they need to hear in order to say yes? What are their values? What are the benefits they're going to want to see in order to feel like we could say yes? And then we've had sort of partnership conversations about trying to bring those two sides together. So can I say those two questions again? Probably not, but I can try.
That's sounds about right.
So the first side is what makes it hard to ask, because part of the client's difficulty in the having to ask may actually be their resistance to speaking up. And so I want to ask that, like, what makes it hard to ask? The other is quite often, how do I make the case in a way that they understand? And so what are their values? What benefit is the company going to want to see in order to make this an easy yes? And so questions about, what have you heard them say? What has come from HR? Yeah, Shane, there you are in the comment in the chat. Those are the ones. Because quite often the how do I make the case for my employer is it's just hard to have empathy for somebody else when we're stuck in our own pain. And so sometimes as a coach to ask that, what have you heard HR say? That you can take that in. But the other places, we might be back at the RSD conversation again.
This seems to be a theme of like life. Yeah, the ones that have come to me most often, if they're having their employer, if they want their employer to pay for it, they're not talking to me until they know that's a possibility because they can't pay for it themselves necessarily. Bye, Erin. See you later. I've had a couple people who have it's been part of their accommodations or upcoming accommodations after they have disclosed and they're requesting accommodations. There's also a whole disclosure piece around it that can be challenging. I have one gig where it's like this great coaching culture where we have a bench of coaches and they have like a coaching part of the learning and development division, and everybody in the company gets $8,000 professional development money every year. And there's approved ways that you can spend it, and one of the ways is on coaching. Those are most often the ways that I have been aligned, or like a few times individuals have come to me pretty sure they can get funding from their employers, but I haven't had to do the advocating or like the asking before, Asia. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I've had similar situations, where people have come knowing that they have a certain amount of money. And yeah, I think part of my thought was just partially for some folks, it would be around disclosure. I have one person who's trying to decide if she wants to go through the disclosure process that for accommodations through her workplace, and she works for a government agency. So there's a lot more red tape than than maybe some other organizations. So that she's trying to decide if she wants to go that route. So yeah, so no, thank you. I appreciate that.
Shane, to answer your question, we are doing them once a month, at least through December. Because of some time wonkiness in terms of like scheduling, our next one's actually next Tuesday in the evening. Which I think was in your reminder email that came just before this started. And then the next one is December 9th, which is a Monday at this time. And then we also have a couple webinars coming up, masterclasses coming up. What else? This is terrible, but I actually kind of love it when Ravon's off camera because I get to see the Cheshire Cat. It's pretty great. What else is on your mind?
I
Well,
think
I
Asia
have-
has another.
Yeah, sorry, Shane, I didn't mean to send that to you directly.
That's okay.
Yeah, so different tack. I have a client who is ADHD and has I think one of my first clients really who's had very little vocal inflection, very flat affect, very little body language. And I tend to there's a lot that you can get from folks through their, their energy and all of that. And so I'm just wondering, whether, how anybody has, how they've worked with their clients who may have had something similar. I'm just in terms of trying to get a sense of like their energy or how they're feeling about things, or if they're excited about anything. And so yeah, so that's just like they're a relatively new client, and I'm just trying to find some different ways that I might be able to engage with them.
I've done a lot of phone coaching, and I adore phone coaching. I prefer phone coaching to in-person or video coaching for one very simple reason. I mean, there's some reasons that it's often easier as a client to do phone coaching than these other kinds of coaching. But as a coach, I adore phone coaching because I have no data that I could make assumptions about what's going on with them. So I absolutely have to ask them all the time. And so that's what I would offer you is I would say, I would slow down as your coach, and as things come up, if they're silent, ask them. And if you can't tell what the quality of the silence is, ask them. So you're silent. What's going on in the silence? What's your inner experience? And ask them. And so you're not knowing, like I would offer to you that you could treat that as a gift, because it's going to force you to slow down and actually get curious about how did that land? What's going on for you right now? What is it that you're noticing? The lack of data that you're getting creates a blanker slate for you to get more curious.
That would have been, my answer would have been similar, though likely not as eloquent. Like, I start asking, I start noticing, I start becoming more attuned to the objective things I'm noticing, like a little more tension in the face, or, when are their eyes going somewhere different? Things like that. I get, because of the lack of data other places, I get more attuned to that. And then I can ask about those things, or I know that's a time to ask what's going on right now. But definitely, I think, like, when you don't know or you can't sense it, even if you do think you know and you think you can sense it, you ask the client, right?
Yeah. There are quite a lot of people, autistic and ADHD, who are pretty disconnected between the interior and the exterior. And sometimes that's wiring that never got made. And sometimes that's a trauma response. And it can actually be really, really powerful to be in that space of, if there's a small nuanced thing you notice, and you name it and ask about it, like Tracy's describing, there's actually a way in which the asking of that question and being asked that question, even if the answer is, I don't know, primes the body to start making those connections more. And so as a coach, it's really powerful to not be attached to whether the client is able to answer those questions or not, to not be attached to what kinds of answers come, and to keep asking anyway, because the I don't know is often the instigation for the brain in the client to start actually trying to build some neurons that didn't exist, that might actually increase the knowing over time. But as a coach, we have to be like totally okay with the I don't knows.
When somebody says, I don't know, I keep waiting for a little while. And if that's it, that's what they got, like, okay, we can be in that. And also, sometimes I don't know is the immediate response. And if you give a second, like Kate was saying, like the brain starts to make different connections and they go, I don't know. Blah, and they do know.
And I've had clients who develop more expressiveness through the coaching process as a byproduct of some of these conversations. And I know that it's not direct, like one to, like, it's not a direct, I say something and then this is happening. But over time, it sometimes has this impact. Lisa talking about the wheel of emotions, just struggling emotions, beyond happy, angry. I use, getting language to make the distinctions can be really powerful. So yes, the wheel of emotions is super useful. The other thing I run into is sometimes people who are like, I need to get really specific about what these emotion words mean, and they get hung up on the differences between the emotion words. And for those people, I go back to like, is this pleasant or unpleasant? Like I go like all the way back. So playing along that spectrum can be really interesting. All right, Tracy, you're having thoughts.
Well, yes, two of them. One of them is a funny, which is one of my clients, such a sweet man, so disconnected, so depressed, anxious. And when I showed him the wheel of the wheel that has all the emotions on it, his response was, "There's all these emotions?" I was like, "It's a start, dude. Like it's a start." It was hilarious. Secondly, Kate, you showed me this. When you can't get the words around it, that tree that had all the different people and different things, and it was like, which one are you? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the blob people, the
Which I
blob.
forget about too much. I know, like same thing, Marissa. The first time she showed it to me, I was like, what the heck are you talking about? But like, that's all I had to say, and she knew it. So she's bringing it up so you guys understand what I'm talking about, rather than describe it. Because sometimes the words aren't there, right? So sometimes like we'll go to the alternate ways of being, like visual. So while she's bringing that up, yeah.
Yeah, the SEO isn't working properly and it's not coming up
Ah,
easily.
Blob people tree. I got it.
Yeah, you got it.
I got something. Let's try this one.
Yeah, this.
Nope, that's not it. There it is.
That-
Can you guys see that? So like, which of these are you right now?
Yeah, and then why? It's which of these are you and why? Because one of the things, and this can be really, really powerful for our autistic clients because the logic of it can be really, really helpful. The way our bodies make emotions is we have a sensation that, and basically pleasant or unpleasant is, or neutral are the basic sensations. And we have a sensation in a part of our body. And then our brain takes the context of the world around us and interprets the sensations, pleasant or unpleasant, in the parts of our body. And that interpretation is the emotion. And so it's that process of interpreting in context that creates all of those emotions. And what this exercise does is it actually gives a physical visual for the context, which helps for interpreting the sensations to get to emotion. But it's the conversation about and why that helps unlock the complexity of what's going on for the client and helps build that vocabulary.
So if you're looking for something like this, obviously when I pulled it up, there were a zillion of them. My Google search was blob people tree, in case that's helpful. So I think that could be useful. Asia, how are we doing on this issue of like, I can't read my client, what do I do with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think just the general idea of just maintaining curiosity and just checking in more often is kind of like where I'm leaning, but but it's always good to just kind of hear if there's any other thoughts. So I appreciate it.
Anybody else have something to add there? Just because we hold the Zoom room doesn't mean we know all the things by a long shot.
And also we've been around a while, so we know some things.
Kate is more confident about that than I am. She always reminds me that we know things.
I mean, I think that is one of the things that's really, really powerful to remember is that it's actually a gift in this work to not know all the things.
I love it. I love it.
Can I say
Because-
something?
Please,
Yeah.
Marissa. Is it Marissa? Marisa?
Marisa,
Marisa. Thank
you can say, oh, anyway, so I'm Portuguese, so my English is not the best. Let me just tell you that it's amazing to have this space to talk about this stuff, because in Portugal, we are not many working in this area. I started as an occupational therapist, and now after doing coaching, now I'm a coach. One of my challenges is to show to people, to my possible clients, that my work is more than doing just therapy, because I'm not doing therapy. So how do you clarify the difference between doing therapy and doing coaching in this neurodiversity area?
So I cover this, first of all, right away, like early in my discovery call, because I want to make the expectations clear. And I talk about it as a Venn diagram. And like there is an overlap between therapy and coaching. And we both are figuring out self-awareness, new perspectives, asking questions, all that kind of stuff. What therapy sometimes doesn't do is the action piece. Some therapists do, but like a lot of therapists don't, right? That's why they end up with coaching, because they feel like they've been running in place. And so that's the part that I say, this is what we will do each time, is we will co-create experiments for you, right? Based on this new awareness, we co-create an experiment. We figure out what might work, what might not work, what you need to support you in that, what will you do if it doesn't go well, all these things. And I always frame them as experiments because you can't fail an experiment. Like some coaches talk about homework, which I don't know about anybody else, but it makes me anxious, like just saying the word. And I was good at homework, right? But for a lot of our clients that weren't good at school, that's tough. Experiments, you can't fail. Even if it goes wrong, it's data. Or if it doesn't, even if you don't do it, that's data. And even if the action is reflect, right? But if there's something more for the client to be doing than just showing up at session. Like the real work happens between the sessions. The other thing I think is, I'm not sure I'm as explicit about this, so thank you for making me think about this. But I think they get a sense of that in our discussion, is the sense of partnering rather than knowing better. I think that's key. And I do think I say stuff about that when I talk about, here's the thing, this is my line, is like, you've known you for 43 years and I've known you for 20 minutes. Who's more likely to come up with solutions for you, right? I will help you come to new awareness, and I might have a few things that have worked for other clients, but if you could have Googled it and found the thing, you wouldn't be talking to me. So I will partner with you to find the solutions that are unique to you, that get you where you want to go. And it may be a thing that doesn't work for anybody else, and I don't care. So like that part of it, I think too, the level setting, those are probably the two things for me. Kate, what do you think?
I think that you articulate a lot of the things that I think. I tend not to actually do this conversation very often. For whatever reason, it doesn't actually come up with my clients and my potential clients nearly as much as it does with other coaches about this, which I find fascinating. But one of the things that I do talk about is coaching is grounded in the assumption that you are capable of figuring out things for yourself. And we're working on unlocking that. And that therapy historically comes from a tradition of how do we make you good enough to thrive in the world? And that at the advanced levels, like a good therapist and a good coach working together on sort of normal human life stuff, what they do actually looks a lot alike. It's in the edges and the assumptions that they come from when things get difficult, that the two differ more in this world. And so the more the client feels I don't have agency, the more therapists come from a position that matches that need. And the more clients come from a place of, I need to make something work for me, the more coaching is the right place.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My clients actually do ask a lot. A lot of them have been to therapy a bunch and they want to know what's going to be different. So that's, I typically don't bring it up unless they do. But I still say the things about partnering and experiments and all that. Lisa, thank you for putting those resources in there. I'm just popping in a couple of upcoming things in the chat while we still have the time, because Kate and I both have a hard stop in 10 minutes. And also, what else?
Because we've got 10 minutes.
Yes.
And if you've been around the coaching world for long enough, you know that we can do a lot in 10 minutes. True. I had a client just the other week, and they do half-hour sessions, and we did 25 minutes on the topic. And then we had 6 minutes. We had 6 minutes left. And I was like, so where now? And my client said to me, we've got a whole 6 minutes, and brought in a whole new topic, and we did it in 6 minutes. It was so fabulous. I was like, you've been around long enough to know that if we've only got 6 minutes, we're going to use those 6 minutes effectively.
I love it when we have the clients trained. You know? When they've been with us long enough that like we can have some shorthand like that. I think that's so fun.
Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, so now you're on the verge of not needing me anymore. What do we need to do to get it so you don't need me at all? So do we have one more maybe? What's on your mind?
It's been great questions so far, y'all. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with HDA late in sessions?
I'm sorry, with what?
Maybe I wasn't clear. How do you deal with being late to the session? So
By the way, I don't know what you're talking about your English, because like it's amazing. And whenever somebody who's speaking English as a second language or third language or fourth language, I'm always like, y'all are still way better than us Americans in general in terms of any languages. So like,
thank you.
you do you. Late. So I am often a couple of minutes late. So there's that.
Devi attiva il calendar su Canvas e guarda le lezioni.
Chiara? Hello? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I don't speak. I think that was Italian. Or maybe it was Portuguese. Was it Portuguese? Rats. Okay.
I would say it's Spanish.
Okay. See, I don't have an ear for what languages. So what I do is at 5 minutes, I drop an email and or a text. Say, hey, we're supposed to have a session right now. You know, is everything okay? Because sometimes they've just like, this just happened a couple weeks ago. They just got wrapped up in something that they thought was going to take 4 minutes, and all of a sudden they don't realize it's right. At 10 minutes, or 10 or 12 minutes, I send a note that says like, I do hope everything's okay. You know, let me know when you get this, you know, and then I sign off. And honestly, and I'm really lenient. My contract says if you're 10 minutes late, the session's forfeit. So I have that I can enforce if I want to. But given who my clients are, they're usually making a good faith effort to get there. And so I give them, I usually give them just one time that like, it's fine. And that's in my head, right? But I will say like, if this becomes a habit, then we're gonna need to talk about it. But I'm pretty lenient, you know, like I don't have anything else planned for that hour. So if they come at half an hour and say, I'm so sorry, I was stuck in a meeting, can we still meet? I'll give them the other 20 minutes or whatever. Like I said, I know I'm pretty lenient on it. And also like, God, they're working hard enough. There's enough shame about not showing up and being late and all that. Like I don't want to compound that if I can do that without being unreasonable to myself. Yeah.
Yeah, without being unreasonable to myself
That's
is
the
really,
part.
really powerful. Like for me, I have to feel good about what accommodations I'm making. And so it has to be, I need to feel good about respecting my own time, and I want to be compassionate about my clients' challenges. If there's a patterns of lates, I might suggest that we make showing up on time a coaching topic to see if there are strategies that might help show up on time for me. Because I know that if there are strategies that will help them show up on time for sessions with me, that that will help them, that will generalize to other parts in their world. And so I don't see that as disciplinary or punitive to actually sort of suggest that we make that a coaching topic. I know that that will generalize.
Yeah, I think that thing of like getting curious, you know, when something's happening as a pattern that's not great, you know, the thing of starting a session by saying, so I'm noticing this, what's going on? What's up? You know, and coaching through that. How's that sit?
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Lisa.
Yeah, on that similar thing, I had a client once who was being consistently late, and I just framed it as, I'm wondering if there's a different time that's better, because I'm noticing you're sometimes struggling to get to these. And we ended up moving it from like a lunchtime slot to an evening slot, because she just was not in control of what was happening in work as to whether she could get to a lunch break at the lunch break. And actually giving that opportunity for it to be at a different time, she was like, oh my God, that'd be awesome. Is that okay? You kind of think, why don't you just ask? But yeah, but I think she hadn't realized that evenings were an opportunity. So just putting it out there, she was like, yeah, rather than saying, can we coach around your lateness? It's not always in your control, is it?
Yeah, and considering how much trouble many of us have asking for help or working really hard to not be a problem, not be a bother, not, you know, be a nuisance.
Are we back at the RSD conversation again?
We are always back at the RSD conversation. We are always at the RSD conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what we're all landing on here is that by respecting our own time and understanding the kinds of complexity that our clients are dealing with internally and externally, and taking leadership and making it a shared problem, that's the sense of principles that I'm working under. Yeah.
So we do have just a couple minutes left, and I'm curious about anything. Like, what are you taking away, or what are you still missing, or what would you like to see? Like, whatever that's coming up for you right now as we're coming to a close in this moment. So you can come off mic, or you can put it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with, or you can pass. That's okay too.
How to enforce boundaries without feeling badly. Yeah, it's the yes and. Yeah. The blob tree. Yes, that is I love that tool. I don't use it very often these days with my clients, but there have been periods where I used it a lot. Love that one. I just want to name that once again, I am struck by how many people there are who care about the same client base I care about, doing work and trying to be the best coaches they can be. And these questions are really deep, great questions, and I'm just struck.
That's what was coming up for me was like, and it happens during like pretty much everything that we've done that's outward facing. It's just so amazed and grateful, and also not amazed because of course of the questions and the discussions and what everybody has to add and how to help each other. It's just super cool. Thank you, Kiara. I'm glad that was helpful. Come back.
Yes.
Asia. Yeah, straight like Asia said, it's nice to be here with everyone. You know, because we are a small sliver of the coaching world, sometimes it's just nice to be with other people who are like facing stuff that maybe, you know, performance coaches or who knows, aren't necessarily facing. So yeah.
Yeah. And coaching, as Shane says, can be lonely generally. So many of us run our own show, or it's just us with our clients so much, doing a lot of holding space. And it's good for us to be able to come together. And with that, I'm going to suggest that we say it's been a wonderful 90 minutes, and we look forward to more conversations later. Thank you so much for your active participation. It's a real joy being in community with you all.
Come see us again.
Yes, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you. All right. See y'all later. Have great
See y'all later.
days or evenings wherever you are.
Thank you.
Bye.